Dinosaurs and man, two species separated by 65 million years of evolution, have just been suddenly thrown back into the mix together. How can we possibly have the slightest idea of what to expect?
Hello, and welcome to the Neo Jurassic podcast, a weekly speculative exploration into the wild possibilities of a Neo Jurassic world. I'm your very humble host, Brian, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to what is our very first episode. One of the biggest challenges facing the Jurassic franchise moving forward is to provide a semi-rational purpose behind the de-extinction of enormous Mesozoic animals. Sure, people would pay truckloads of cash to visit a dinosaur theme park, and I'd even go so far as to say that even after the events of Jurassic World, there would be at minimum 74 million people out there clamoring for a visit. One need only reflect upon the US's response to the pandemic in 2020 to eliminate any doubt you might have about that. However, the current trajectory of the Jurassic franchise hints to a world in which this technology has been embraced for purposes well beyond just theme park monsters. In Crichton's novels, many possible applications were offered, ranging from medical testing to patented designer pets with patented designer foods. The Jurassic World series so far has pretty much just focused on weaponized animals engineered for military applications, but I'm sure that is probably on the lower end of actual real-life applications. A major aspect of my interest in a Neo Jurassic World is imagining how our world might respond to these possibilities. Each episode of this season will open with a fictionalized version of this podcast that contextualizes and dramatizes the possibilities of this technology with real-world science and real-world motivations. What possible motivation could there be for resurrecting a predatory pterosaur the size of a small plane? Well, the story laid out in this episode's intro, while obviously satirical in nature, was also the most plausible situation I could imagine. The circumstances surrounding the tragic death of Edison X CEO Aaron Peters' 13-year-old son have been shrouded in total mystery. Up until very recently, like yesterday, nobody had any clue of what happened during last month's deadly incident at the new Edison X compound in Texas. Now, in the wake of yesterday's press conference, a flood of truly bonkers new details have been revealed. Details that would be of particular interest to my fellow Neo Jurassic listeners. Buckle up, y'all. Not only are the details surrounding this tragic death kind of shocking, they are directly linked to the current proliferation of de-extinction projects popping up all around the globe. So before we get into it, here's some context. Since his acquisition of Edison X 17 years ago, Aaron Peters has aggressively expanded into a myriad of industries: aeronautics, aerospace, automobile, neurotechnology, and now, apparently, genetic engineering. In recent years, many of Peters' ambitious projects have been the subject of significant criticism from members of the scientific community as well as business leaders. They've argued most of these projects have done more for the company's media standing than achieve any meaningful scientific advancements. These days, Mr. Peters' wealth and status as an industrial tycoon has more or less been eclipsed entirely by his own celebrity and consistent pursuits of spectacle over purpose. 5 years ago, Edison X was one of the very first companies to make the exodus from Silicon Valley to Texas. No doubt Peters' very cozy relationship with both the US and Texas government played a major factor in this decision. Lax regulation, tax breaks, enormous subsidies, and a comparably enormous plot of land proved to be an irresistible offer for Peters. And so it was decided that a sprawling new Edison X compound will be built just 40 miles outside of Austin. A year into construction, however, locals took notice of something never mentioned in any of the announced plans. Something that appeared to be a colossal geodesic dome. The rumor mill went into overdrive on both a local and international level. A mile and a half from the main compound, something truly huge was being built, and the world was left wondering, what the hell is that thing? In the media, the most popular guess at the time was some kind of 21st century homage to the World's Fair or something. the type of grandiose hollow spectacle Peters had become so well known for over the years. Others affiliated with the company whispered about the dome being part of a new conservation project. This idea was pretty quickly met with considerable skepticism, as many noted, myself included, that Edison X had a pretty solid track record of pursuing interplanetary colonization over any Earthbound conservation efforts. Initially, I had kinda assumed the structure would be Peters' over-the-top interpretation of a biodome, a means of meeting conservation efforts and the colonization of Mars halfway or something. However, as the dome neared completion, I kinda developed a theory of my own, a theory that as of yesterday has more or less been confirmed. The structure, now completed, is said to be about 17 stories tall at its highest point and about a mile in diameter. Until very recently, the dome remained a total mystery. Notably, even those within the upper echelons of the company were kept entirely in the dark regarding its purpose. Security around the compound has been said to rival that of military operations, and security around the dome itself is reportedly on another level entirely. Those within the company gave the mysterious looming dome the affectionate nickname of the Death Star 3, a name that quickly took root in the surrounding community and media as well. Now, in the wake of this truly tragic loss of life, details regarding the true purpose of the unfortunately named Death Star 3 are finally coming to light. And as I'm sure many of you have surely guessed at this point, it's an aviary. Edison X is now officially among the growing list of companies worldwide to have successfully de-extincted Mesozoic megafauna, undoubtedly by reverse engineering the once proprietary de-extinction technologies pioneered by InGen way back in the day. It's safe to assume Edison X's team has taken InGen's base pteranodon genome and engineered a group of Quetzalcoatlus northropi. This really probably shouldn't come as too much of a surprise, as the company has a long, and I mean long, problematic history of reverse engineering existing patents and plowing through any legal disputes. Now, specific details surrounding the death of Rand Peters are pretty scarce, but I can tell you this. On the day of the incident, 4 individuals entered the Edison X aviary. Aaron Peters, Rand Peters, project manager Robert Peel, and the animal's lead handler Ellen Kim. This intimate presentation was apparently going to be the CEO's first introduction to Edison X's Quetzalcoatlus program. Allegedly, Peters was given strict instruction to attend the event alone. Peters, of course, as he so often does, defied company protocol and brought his 13-year-old son along for the show. What could go wrong? Unfortunately, we don't really know much of what exactly occurred, but I think it's fairly safe to assume at this point that young Rand Peters was indeed eaten. In yesterday's press conference, project manager Robert Peel said the animals were much more intelligent than anticipated. They had been regularly observed exhibiting coordinated hunting behavior and generally displayed behavioral traits comparable to other social predators. According to Peel, over the past 4 years, the pterosaurs seldom, if ever, displayed any aggressive behavior towards their handlers. Hearing this, it becomes slightly more understandable how the tween son of the billionaire CEO was given clearance to the presentation. Now, you're probably wondering, why on earth would a company best known for trying to colonize Mars be investing untold billions into the extinct flying reptile business? Well, I can think of at least 2 reasons. The first, of course, being Aaron Peters' spectacular ego and full-time pursuit of tech spectacle. I mean, of course, Peters would be the one to slap a patent on the largest flying animal the Earth has ever known. Of course he would. And what's more, the cute marketing synergy of it all had to have been irresistible. It's worth noting what we know as Texas today was Quetzalcoatlus' home back in the Cretaceous. And with news of Peters starting his own Major League Basketball team in Austin, well, I would not be surprised to see a Quetzalcoatlus mascot bouncing around in the bleachers of the new Edison X Mega Stadium. Although, in wake of current events, that may now be a little less likely. Then there's the reason detailed in yesterday's press conference: biomimicry. Over the past decade or so, biomimicry has proven to have tremendous potential in the aeronautics industry. Standing the height of a giraffe with the weight of a full-grown grizzly bear, Quetzalcoatlus would appear to be incapable of powered flight. Yet they did fly, and they did it exceptionally well. According to Peel, the project has already led to several promising lines of research: new quadrupedally launched drones, a polymer that somehow mimics the structures of pterosaur bones, and major insights into the aerodynamic features of their huge wing membranes. It's honestly unclear what's going to happen with the animals in the wake of this truly tragic event. At least one of the company's 5 Quetzalcoatlus has reportedly been euthanized. It's anyone's guess what will happen with the remaining 4. If you couldn't guess by the intro, our very first episode will be devoted entirely to the past, present, and future of pterosaurs in the Jurassic franchise. In particular, we'll be focusing on what very well may be my all-time favorite Mesozoic beastie, Quetzalcoatlus. I've been waiting, hoping, and wishing for Quetzalcoatlus to make an appearance in this franchise for the better part of like 2.5 decades now. And frankly, I am baffled as to why these enormous flying murderheads haven't shown up yet. Joining us for this deep dive into the mysterious and magnificent world of pterosaurs is one of the world's foremost experts on the matter, Dr. Mike Habib. Those of you that follow paleontology may very well be familiar with Dr. Habib. He penned that wonderful pterosaur cover story for Scientific American in the fall of 2019, and over the past decade has authored and co-authored many articles on pterosaur research. Being both a paleontologist as well as a biomechanist, Dr. Habib was particularly well suited to working through the myriad mysteries surrounding pterosaurs. Up until relatively recently, it was fairly unclear how the largest of these pterosaurs, known as Darkids, managed to get airborne. With an estimated weight in the range of 600 pounds, it was even a question whether or not these humongous animals could even fly to begin with. Armed with the confounding physiology and physics of these bizarre and beautiful animals, Dr. Habib has provided tremendous insights into what these animals were and were not capable of. Yes, it looks like these enormous reptiles did indeed own the late Cretaceous skies, but how does an animal with the height of a giraffe, a head 10 feet long or so at the end of a long neck, and the weight of a grizzly bear manage to launch itself into the air? Pterosaurs, unlike birds, were quadrupedal, a feature of their design that they utilized to the fullest extent possible. It was this doubly powerful quadrupedal leap launch that made it possible for these colossal Darkids to become airborne. In addition to working out the flight mechanics of these plane-sized critters, Dr. Habib was also part of the team responsible for describing that huge new Canadian Darkid discovered in 2019, Cryodracon. If it's not already obvious, I'm happy to just come out and say it. I have been a huge fan of his work for a while now, and I am extremely excited and extremely honored to share our conversation with y'all. We're going to start things off discussing Dr. Habib's relationship with the Jurassic franchise, its pterosaurs, and the very real dangers of a hungry Quetzalcoatlus. Let's dive in.
So my relationship to the Jurassic franchise is primarily just as an old fan. I mean, it came out, the original Jurassic Park was released in 1993. I'm going to give my age here by saying that I was 13 at the time. Well, just about to turn 13, actually. I was 12, going on 13. And it was just such a strong rekindling of my ongoing passion for paleontology I'd had since I was a young kid. And so it was a really important film for me in terms of making that dream, or I should say maybe putting that dream back on the front burner. It wasn't like something that I hadn't dreamed of doing or studying. I'd actually announced when I was 4 that I wanted to be a paleontologist when I grew up, which was something of interest because I'm not sure my parents at the time knew that I at age 4 could say paleontologist properly. And they learned that one fairly quickly. But yeah, it's been, and I've enjoyed the series ever since. I have not had a deep professional role. I've been a speaker for multiple premier events associated with the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles County for like the Jurassic World sort of reboot of the franchise, if you will. My life has intersected with the consultants on Jurassic Park in a number of different ways. My PhD advisor is good friends of Jack Horner, who is the consultant on it for many years, and the new consultant for Jurassic World is Steve Brasati, who is a old friend of mine as well. So to some extent, I guess I've been able to bend the ear of the consultants in Jurassic World, and I've talked about it a lot, and I've given professional events related to Jurassic Park and Jurassic World and the whole Jurassic franchise. But I've never been like on a set or anything of that nature for it. And I was briefly involved as a consultant on a pitch for a potential game to go Jurassic World, which was not picked up. So I didn't have anything to do with the Jurassic World game that was picked up, but I was involved in a pitch.
What was the game that wasn't, if I may ask?
So this was pitched by Seamus Blackley, and the trailer pitch that he put together was a pair of Quetzalcoatlus picking people off at a beach, hitting surfers and landing on and crushing a lifeguard house and such.
And that was a game of what type exactly? Like, what was the intended experience for gamers?
It was. I think it was going to. The plan, as I understand it, was to harken back a little bit to, like, I guess the old Sony version where there was a playthrough mode as one of the lead human characters, one or more of the lead human characters, but also playthrough mode is one or more of the non-human animals.
Yeah. Oh, that would have been rad.
I think that would have been very, very cool.
I've seen that little trailer and I love it very much. And I've been begging anyone with any tangential relationship to the Jurassic franchise to please consider implementing Adzarchids in these movies and television series rather than the leathery seagull gremlins that we currently have.
Yeah. One thing I find very strange about the Jurassic World pterosaurs, aside from the fact that they're honestly awful reconstructions, is the fact that they were bending the laws of physics to make them scary when they could have just used bigger, scarier pterosaurs that were real. Okay, a pteranodon cannot carry off an adult human. It can't even
much less a baby triceratops.
For multiple reasons, not the least being it doesn't have talons, but it's also just from weight ratios and
right.
cue Monty Python jokes here. But then on top of that, it's sort of like it was just very strange because it's like you do realize there were actual animals or actual pterosaurs that had a wingspan of a telephone pole and weighed in at like big grizzly bear, like the higher end of large terrestrial living predators, and it looked a giraffe in the eye, or would if they lived concurrently. It's like that's that thing can just walk around that plaza and just unceremoniously murder humans with
it's right there. It's right there on the table. Just pick it up. It just continuously bewilders me, to be honest.
I know that was very, very strange. And yes, and they are like shrink wrapped, terrible gremlins. It's funny. In fact, the pterosaur anatomy gets worse as the franchise goes on.
As it goes
basically along. You've got I guess you don't see any in the original.
No, but the Lost World had that kind of
pretty decent
pteranodon that like perched in a tree like a falcon or something.
I mean, the perching didn't make a lot of sense, but overall, it wasn't actually a bad reconstruction. And and at the time that was released, actually, the perching ability and foot anatomy wasn't as well known. Anyway,
sure.
So I'm willing to give them a bit of a pass on that. And but it was cool. It wasn't bad. And then what was it? And then in the third film, they've got the big, scary, somehow slightly toothed pteranodons.
Yeah.
But actually, they were pretty good too. I like the fact that they didn't turn them into like lightweight, like foam hang glider animals. That was cool. Like the fact that there's a thud as this thing lands on the bridge, because there would be, because that's like probably a 50-kilo animal or something. That's over 100-pound animal. Okay, fair. They're not too bad. And then it just goes rapidly downhill. And every time you see when they just get more, and by the time you get Jurassic World, it's bad.
Really terrible. And for me, what is the behavior motivation for these animals to soar out of a glass dome and attack the nearest shopping plaza? I don't understand the rationality is. It's just, it literally, I just watched Gremlins 2 and it was almost no different than Gremlins 2. It was the same thing.
Yes, although the anatomy in Gremlins 2 is, I think, much more realistic.
I would agree.
What would actually happen is they're suddenly released, they would scatter in all directions, and then they would, some of them might find the plaza and steal people's tuna sandwiches. Like that would be.
But that's not what happened. It was like Muppet Mayhem down at the Pandora Jewelry store.
It really was. It was Muppet Mayhem. It really is. It's like Muppets 3D gone wrong. The other thing, of course, that's funny about the pterosaurs is that they had multiple films where they showed them having been released. Like, in fact, that the gate comes open in Jurassic Park 3, and they see them from the rescue helicopter lift or whatever. They see them, flying off into the distance. So maybe they're migrating or something. It was, it's fun, kind of last little epilogue note on the film. Well, I mean, these things would be showing up the moment that they're out, and you see one flying free, like I said, at the end of Lost World. Like the moment they would be. It's supposed to be like 100 miles off the coast of Costa Rica. So they would be showing up in Central America in like an afternoon. Like that's not a long way for them to go, especially for Pteranodon, which is what they mostly feature, which was a pelagic, i.e., open ocean animal. So that would be like that. That's a day trip. No problem for it,
for sure.
So it's funny.
I mean, well, I have to say, like, a major motivation for me even doing this project is just my growing frustration with how dirty they done their pterosaurs, among other things, but especially the pterosaurs, because I have such a love and I just think they're so fascinating and exciting and mysterious and spooky and beautiful. And like, that's what I want from my dinosaur movies. I want that kind of energy conveyed, and nothing conveys it better than the mystery of pterosaurs. Like, there's no living descendant here for us to even guess at what that looks like. It's just so endlessly fascinating to me.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I love them. That's one of the reasons why I started working on them heavily in my professional career. People ask, well, what would you use as pterosaurs? And there's multiple reasons. I originally, from a scientific question standpoint, started working on pterosaurs heavily because I was interested in the size limits of flying animals. And so they're the obvious place to go. But I've just become so broadly fascinated with them for all the reasons you just described and more. And I think they really probably would have been fascinating, beautiful, and enjoyable animals on the whole to have around. I'm not necessarily hugely disappointed that we do not live alongside large escarpeds, because things like Cryodracon and Quetzalcoatlus and Hetzegopteryx could ruin your day, i.e. they could just kill you without much trouble, and that would be a hazardous thing. Quetzalcoatlus was found in a group. So the big one, there's only one specimen of the big one, Quetzalcoatlus northropi, but there's a smaller species that's been variably interpreted as juveniles or a separate species. It looks like it's probably a separate species that lends us most of the information on Quetzalcoatlus, because we know the whole skeleton for that. Between all the different partial skeletons we've got. But there was like a half a dozen decent skeletons of it found in fairly close proximity in Big Bend. So
That's really cool. I mean, I can see how that works. Again, watching birds, fan out in a field, and if one bird, scares one little critter, the other bird will get it, as in vice versa,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, but can you just imagine like a row of these just sort of mutualistically?
I can,
even if it's not super coordinated, just like stalking through the high under but that would, but it's terrifying because they're huge. This, by the way, is the small morph, quote unquote, of cats.
Yeah.
And one thing I like that
it has more of a crest, though, right? That's why they don't think it's like a ontogeny
we
issue.
Don't know if it has more of a crest or not. All we have from Northropy is a wing. That's all we have from the big cats. Is a near, not even complete, but pretty near complete left wing. That's all we've got.
Wow.
But little cats, by the way, they call it, I always think it's funny they call it that because
little cats.
Yeah, little cats, because it stood about the height of the tallest current player in the NBA.
Yeah.
It can dunk with its face.
Yeah.
That's the little guy. Like, can you imagine a group of those stalking across, a group of them in a row, like you said, stalking across the fields of the late Cretaceous? Like, that would be terrifying.
Well, I have a question about that, actually, specifically. Of course, if these animals were deployed in a Jurassic something, we all know that they would immediately just be swallowing people whole. With the biomechanics that you've looked into, is that even slightly a possibility? And if not, what would their feeding method be for a human?
So they would struggle to swallow an adult human whole, even the biggest pterosaurs. But Mark Whitten actually did a nice kind of look at this. He's an old friend of mine and co-author who's also pterosaur specialist.
Mm-hmm.
And he we don't have a lot of skull material from the big guys, unfortunately, but we do from Hatzegopteryx, which is the one from
Transylvania.
From Romania. Yeah, Transylvania, exactly. And actually, as it now looks, one of the ones from there.
Right.
So they have multiple species, but it's the biggest.
Yeah.
And they have some skull material, including part of the palate, so the roof of the mouth. And so what he did is he took, they only had the one side, but you can just mirror it. So he mirrored it and figured out what the minimum width of the roof of the mouth would be. Anyway, he found that it could swallow your average fit 12-year-old child whole.
Wonderful.
So it can definitely just like eat your kids and your dog.
Yeah.
and other cherished family members. For an adult human, it can easily wreck you. I mean, it can just grab you. The head on these things is like 50% longer than a Rex.
Yeah.
So it's,
and the neck musculature must have been really strong as well, right?
Yeah. They've got strong necks. They're often shown very thin, shrink wrapped, but that doesn't match the actual bony evidence we have. They have really weird neck bones. It's like just
long,
weird, narrow. Yeah, they're bizarre, but they're bigger than is given credit for, and the attachments for muscle are larger than is given credit for. It's just weird because there are the certain processes of the vertebrae that are normally where like the big neck muscles go, and those are actually small and almost absent in the necks of these animals. But there's other processes that also attach muscles, which are unusually huge in the neck bones of these animals. So they're just they've built up big different muscles than most things do in their neck. But from an outside appearance standpoint, what you would see would be a strong, relatively stiff, strong neck. Yeah. So they've got the power they need there. They've got the big long head, and an adult, killing you is no problem. They grab you, snap your neck or whatever. To break you apart so they could eat you, they'd probably just have to grab you and shake you a bunch and maybe beat you against something nearby. I don't know if you've ever seen what a kookaburra does.
I sure have.
Yeah. As have I. So just think kookaburra with something that's a little big to deal with, in one go and just smash it around a little bit.
It's been curious to me, and so I grew up primarily in Florida, and so I've just been watching, wading predatory herons and things like that, just scarf down animals that would appear to be at least the length of their skull at least, and then the width, just like their neck just expands enormously. And then I think of a kookaburra, which has like a much more compact neck, and it generally seems to have like kind of more flexibility and strength in battering prey animals and doing that sort of thing. And in my mind, the neck structure of a zarkid would be more comparable to the heron and that feeding behavior. But I guess you were saying that the neck musculature is entirely different in Quetzalcoatlus. Like different muscles were augmented.
Yes, different muscles are augmented, and they don't have the super flexible neck of a heron. Herons have lots of neck vertebrae in there.
Yeah.
Whereas, like a lot of birds do. I mean, swans have up to, I think it's 23 cervical vertebrae. We have 7, by the way.
Yeah.
All living mammals have 7. The big Ashdarchids, almost all the neck length is made up by actually 7 of the cervical vertebrae. Actually, only 3 of those really do most of the length. They essentially have 7 functional cervicals as well. So, and 2 dorsalized ones. So their neck is not a heron type of neck.
Yeah.
And we don't know whether or not they had the hyperextensibility of the soft tissues there the way that like some birds do, but we have to remember these were not closely related to birds, really.
Right.
Not super distant, but not that close. So they may have had the extensibility of a heron or something like that, but they don't generally have the kind of flexibility. So somewhere between kookaburra and heron. They have a long neck, but they might have to hit it a little bit more than the heron has to. So, somewhere in there. They probably didn't have the kind of skull kinesis, flexibility in the skull that some birds have as well, which would make it hard to swallow anything.
Because their skulls were fused together, really, right?
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
For the most part, they're fused up. They don't have any crazy extra joints, basically.
Right.
The way the birds do, which is part of how those herons are getting stuff down their gullet that are really big, and things like kookaburras still have those joints, but they're not as flexible because they've tightened things up as well to get strength, probably to for their feeding mode. So kind of bash it like a kookaburra and then swallow chunks like a heron.
So I'm sure it's abundantly clear now at this point, but I love pterosaurs. I'm absolutely crazy about them. The mysteries that surround them, the crazy diversity of their forms, the enormous size of the Ashdarchids, it's all utterly irresistible to me. One of my pet peeves that often comes up when discussing extinct megafauna, and pterosaurs in particular, is this idea that evolution is somehow progressively linear, that extinct animals were somehow less evolved and thus inferior to the species we find on the Earth today. The reality is, in fact, much different. In this next portion of my discussion with Dr. Habib, we'll go into the wildly successful diversity pterosaurs enjoyed across their 160-plus million year reign, and what fossil evidence might be able to tell us about their social lives.
In terms of social behavior, we don't know much for a fact, although we've got lots of sort of circumstantial evidence for complex social behavior. For one thing, these things are utilizing all kinds of crazy physical display
communication
structures, particularly head crests and other kinds of weird facial structures. Also, these little weird tail veins on some of the earlier pterosaurs and things like this. So they've got all these weird flaps and crests and such. I mean, some of these things look like a Rose Bowl float. It's just bizarre, and they're just totally ridiculous. It's not unusual for a pterosaur to have a skull that is 2.5 or 3 times the length of its torso.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not any unusual. There's some there's like 4 or more. And then on top of that, they add like a, some sort of improvised flag, or like what looks like a radar antenna. Like there's a species of Nyctosaurus that has what looks like an antler/radar antenna poking out of the back of its head. So that all indicates some sort of complex social behavior, because those are almost certainly signaling devices of some measure. There's multiple lines of evidence that those are signaling structures. For one thing, they are much more muted in juveniles. In some cases, it looks like there are a couple of different morphs, so it might be a male-female morph. And they would be so costly in every other way. They must be some sort of signaling kind of structure, and they would work magnificently at that. I mean, there'd be no mistaking that. And there's been a bit of an interesting raging debate about whether or not this was sort of a species signaling thing, as in like, hey, you can mate with me because I'm one of you, versus more typical sexual selection where it's like, hey, you can mate with me because I'm one of you and I'm the opposite sex.
Yeah.
And that's a little hard to tease out, because we usually don't know if a specimen was a male or a female. So unless we have really big samples, which only occasionally happens with pterosaurs, can we really say, oh, look, there seems to be two kind of morphs here that could be sexes. And we also don't know whether or not, for example, the similar looking bony structures or soft tissue crests could have very different colors in two sexes. Right. We only recently got any kind of color information from any sort of pterosaur. It looks like the crest of Tupindactylus had a lot of melanins in it, so it was very darkly pigmented at some level, and it may have had other really bright pigments in it, and it may have had some kind of iridescence or things like that as well, or structural colors. But that we can't tell, and they're just looking at the one individual, so we don't know. They'll have to, if they find another one that they can get similar information from, that they think it's the same species, it looks the same in every way, except the color is completely different. That would actually be a really cool finding. That would indicate probably that they're two sexes, and they both have a similar sized crest, but they have totally different color patterns on it to indicate like male versus female.
Has anyone had the opportunity to analyze pycnofibers for any evidence of melanin or anything like that, or structural color or anything like that?
I think they've tried, and I want to say that they do seem to find melanosomes indicating some dark pigments in some of them, but they haven't gotten much. They haven't gotten much. They're not well preserved on a large number of specimens. In the cases where they are, you can often only get good samples in a few places on them.
Yeah.
So, and of course, the melanosome technique only gives you melanins. So browns, red browns, and blacks. And it's like, okay, so we think some of them were kind of brownish and some of them were kind of blackish. Okay. But they're often kind of scrambled. So like what they got lucky with some of the feathers and proto feathers on some dinosaurs, because they hadn't been freed from their original position at all, really. Mm-hmm. And so sure, the actual color you're getting back wasn't exciting, but you could get pattern, because you'd get a band of melanin, a band of no melanin, a band of melanin, and like, oh, this thing was striped.
Yeah.
And it may have been striped just black and white, or it may have been striped like kind of reddish and white, because it could have some carotenoids or something in there too, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Or it could have been black and red if the areas that were low in melanin were rich in something else that we don't have information on. But you can still at least say it was striped, and that's cool.
It is cool.
We haven't been able to say that for pterosaurs yet, but we do have the Tupindactylus crest pigment paper. It just came out this year, actually, which is cool.
Yeah. I really hope we get more cool stuff there. That's just so exciting.
I think we will. And I think that's probably the place to go, is the soft tissue crests with them.
Yeah.
I think one thing that paper showed is that actually there is more promise there than the pycnofibers at present.
If I'm not mistaken, pterosaurs existed on the Earth, to our knowledge, significantly longer than avian birds, right?
Longer, yes, but not by too much. They arrive much earlier, or we
mm-hmm.
the earliest ones. The show up in the fossil record a good bit earlier. So we think that the evolutionary origins of pterosaurs is like middle Triassic, about maybe 230, 240 million years ago, something like that. We'd have good pterosaur fossils from like dated between like 215 and 220 million years. The earliest things that we consider to be within aves, so that fall within the clade defined by like a modern bird and say a Tyrannosaurus Rex, would be like we call Maniraptora, and then you get a little bit more specific, and then like you get like a modern sparrow and say Archaeopteryx. That would be like your true birds, and they start with Archaeopteryx at about 150 million years old. So that's the late Jurassic. So there's a big gap there. But of course, birds have made it to the present, and pterosaurs have not. So pterosaur duration ends up being about 160 to 170, if you assume that there's a little bit of an extension there because we haven't found the earliest pterosaur yet. And birds, even if what we have is the earliest, which probably isn't quite, but maybe we're close, you're looking at 150 duration.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a little less than
little less than. With pterosaurs, really, the real claim to fame in that regard is being the first vertebrates on the block, as regards powered flight. Yeah, that they beat birds too by a good margin, and bats too by an even larger margin. So, yeah.
And it's interesting to think about them having the first powered flight, like the first vertebrate flying. I would have imagined that they would have exploited every potential ecological niche on the globe possible. I would imagine.
Well, probably. Right? The thing is, the fossil record from mid-Triassic locations is not great. We've got good late Triassic localities, still not a lot of pterosaurs from those, not a lot of early Jurassic pterosaurs. So we don't really start getting a good record until like middle to really late Jurassic, at which point there seem to be a lot of pterosaurs in a lot of places, but we still only get a lot of specimens from a relatively small number of places on the globe. So they probably, we know they got really diverse and had a worldwide distribution for much of the Mesozoic. We don't know really how quickly that happened because we just don't have enough information early on. It's perfectly reasonable to expect that they kind of explode. There was this kind of explosion.
Yeah.
We don't have any evidence for it. We don't have any evidence against it. We just don't. We just got a lot of unknowns.
When you, throughout your research, have you been able to find pterosaur analogs for all, if not most, of the very specific niches that birds have found themselves in today? Like, it's often spoken about how pterosaurs were, at least when I was growing up, primarily, sea-going, marine-feeding flyers. Birds, there's so many like bill shapes and forms all over the place. Do you think that pterosaurs likely have such a broad range, like a comparable range of speciation to the demands of all these niches that are available?
It's comparable. You kind of think of it as sort of a Venn diagram. So there is a lot of thing with a lot of overlap. So there's a lot of things that birds do and bats do that pterosaurs did. There's some things that they don't seem to have quite covered. And there's also some things they did that nothing else seems to have done. So, for example, there's just nothing, of course, comparable really to the giant stork from hell mode that was the big edged archids. On the other hand, we don't have anything that really seems all that songbird-like amongst pterosaurs. While there were probably probably actually quite a number of terrestrial and marine hunters amongst them, there probably weren't any that were like raptorial like at least we haven't found any so far, like a hawk or an eagle or anything with, big talons that could take particularly large prey, just snatch it while on the wing kind of thing. But we do have filter feeding pterosaurs. We've got, what seem to have been, carrion feeding, long distance soaring pterosaurs. We have probably ground hunting super storks. We have insect munching, aerial hawking things like, sort of like a nightjar or a lot of bats. We seem to have fruit nut munchers. We've got clam crackers, may have also been bone crackers part of the time. We have, we've got pursuit ground predators, maybe some pursuit aerial predators as well, although grabbing things with your face.
What does a pursuit ground predator look like exactly?
Some of the istiodactylids may have done this, and also a couple of folks have proposed that for some of the what are called asharcoids, particularly tapiarids. Like Thalassodromius was proposed to have been a skim feeder. There's still some suggestions that it was, but there was also work indicating that that its size and aspects of its shape would have precluded that. So skim feeding would be you dip the mandible into the water at high speed, just snatching stuff. But it does have this blade on the mandible. And so that this led to an argument of, well, why does it have this blade if it doesn't? Anyway, it actually looks like Thalassodromius and its close relatives were pretty good on the ground, probably decent runners. And so I suggested that maybe the blade is an actual blade, not a water cutting blade, but an animal cutting blade. And this thing,
like a slasher movie pterosaur,
basically a slasher movie pterosaur. So it may have just been it may just be a guillotine, just a running flying guillotine.
Wow.
And it just slices things. Mark Whitten has illustrated that. Actually, he's got a beautiful painting of two Thalassodromius just like running across a Cretaceous landscape, just destroying things by cutting them up.
I've got to see that. And so I would imagine if there was like a heavily derived flightless pterosaur, it probably would have popped up in that lineage.
That's a possibility. It could show up there. It could certainly show up in Ashdarkids proper. The ones that include the supergiants, which seem to have been quite adept on the ground, comparatively speaking, as well. That's one thing we don't really have any good evidence for at present. Is any flightless pterosaurs. There is a group that says they think they have a giant flightless pterosaur, but it hasn't been described. A skeletal mount was actually put on display at one point, but there's no formal description in the literature. And I'm personally not.
What's the holdup on that?
I don't know. It's one of these things where it's just this is not a team that I happen to know particularly well. So I don't know what it is that they think might be indicative of flight loss in it, but we'll see. It might also just be a matter of them trying to be very thorough, knowing that such a claim would be a pretty big shakeup, so to speak, and
sure.
that they don't want to
ruffle any feathers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they don't. They know they're going to ruffle some feathers. They don't want to do it without having really done their homework. So they might just be they might just be taking their time and running and rerunning, and can we come at this any other way? And because we don't want to get totally trashed in review on this thing just because of people's knee-jerk reaction. So it might just be taking a lot of time to do that. It may also be that they didn't have the whole thing prepped, and it was kind of a initial reaction thing where they're like, this looks like it's flightless to us with the first quarter of it or whatever that we have prepped out of the rock, but we can't describe it until the whole thing is out. So and prep can take a very long time. I have no idea what kind of matrix, what kind of sediment this thing's in. Sometimes these things get preserved in stuff that's got the material properties of concrete and it can take a very long time to get it done. And of course, a lot of prep labs have been heavily affected by the pandemic. So
Yeah,
it might just literally be on hold. I have no idea.
Gosh, I really hope y'all enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Habib like half as much as I have. I really can't stress enough what an incredible joy and privilege it was to speak about some of my favorite animals with one of the humans that understands them the best. One major element that we'll no doubt be discussing pretty consistently throughout the show concerns paleoart and creature design. Easily, one of my favorite aspects of being a paleo obsessive is experiencing the incredible work of paleoartists all over the world, bringing these creatures back to life across so many different mediums. For better or worse, I'd say Jurassic Park might be the single most popular form of paleoart the world has ever, or maybe will ever know. However, in 2021, there is a flourishing and diverse community of artists out there that might just be bringing us closer to actually witnessing the truth and beauty of these creatures than genetic engineering ever could. Which brings me to, well, have y'all seen the Star Wars prequels? While I certainly have, let's say, mixed feelings about them, I don't think anyone could deny the incredible creatures that were introduced across the entire trilogy. Those critters were designed by, in my humble opinion, one of, if not the best, creature artists of all time, Terrell Whitlatch. Beyond designing legendary movie monsters, Terrell Whitlatch is known for bringing illustrated animals to life in ways no one else can. Seriously, Google her stuff. She has several gorgeous books that are essential texts for aspiring paleo or creature artists. In this next and sadly final portion of our chat with Dr. Habib, I'll just be fanboying out wildly over an extremely exciting upcoming collaboration he has with Terrell Whitlatch, as well as other really wonderful projects he's had a hand in over the years. Enjoy.
I love Terrell Whitlatch's work so much. Like since I can remember, like for a long time, I've been a big. I guess since the prequels came out is when I was introduced to her work, and I've just been a huge fan of her creature design since. And when I saw her in the Scientific American, I was just like, "Whoa, so cool!"
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yep. So I wrote. Yeah, Chris. Yes, that was that article. So actually, she got recruited for that Sci American article by me because she and I were already working together. We actually did an article together for Journal of Natural Science Illustration, and now we're doing a book. We've been working together for a few years now.
Can you tell me about the book?
Its
I'm really
working title is Flying Monsters, and it is about anatomical reconstruction of all kinds of winged creatures, living and fossil, as well as particularly paleo-inspired imagined flying creatures. And so it involves all kinds of, we were re-envisioning dragons and hippogriffs, and cockatrice is in there. That's like based on microraptorines and all kinds of crazy stuff. We have we've got our take on the Dracula narrative, which is just a giant throat gutting vampire bat with Agdark and pterosaur kinds of proportions, basically, to make it like flight and launch capable at giant size. So it's got like a 1 meter long head. And just cookie cutters, mammoths.
So it's kind of like a Dougal-Dixon speculative evolution
in some places. And in other cases, it's straight up fantasy,
yeah.
But there's still we've made the dragons anatomically plausible and launch capable and stuff using pterosaur anatomy, things like that.
So rad. Working with Terrell Whitlatch must be just a fun fantasy.
Oh, it totally is. So in terms of our actual meeting, if you want the full story, so I was asked to give a presentation at the Santa Cruz meeting, moves every year, like a lot of things do, to sort of Santa Cruz meeting of the Guild of Natural Science Illustrators. Okay, cool. And so I went to I go to this meeting, really excited to go to a GNSI meeting and present on reconstructing Mesozoic vertebrates, particularly pterosaurs and dinosaurs. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that one of the keynote speakers is Terrell Whitlatch. I'm like, oh, definitely, of course, going to that, and I'm, front and center and just eating it up because I'm such a fan of her work. And and then at the end, of course, she's doing book signings. And actually, I had her Wildlife of Star Wars book in my backpack. I had not meant to bring it for a signing because I had done my homework and like looked at all the speakers, but I happened to have it because I just love it and I've been reading it, whatever. And I had it on my trip. So I was like, oh, great, I'll have her sign it. So I go up and fanboy hard, right? And I'm like, can you sign my book? You know, and I'm wearing my conference badge. And she goes, oh, you're Dr. Habib. I'm going to be coming to your talk later on Mesozoic vertebrates. And on the outside, I managed to get out, oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you there. On the inside, I just squeal. Just right, like just a high-pitched, sustained, squeal of a 10-year-old boy. But fortunately, only an internal monologue. And sure enough, she shows up. She's front and center for my talk. And after she came, she says, I really wanted to work on my pterosaur reconstructions for a long time. We should do something together. I'd really be interested in teaming up. And I'm like, again, internal squeal outside. I think that's fantastic. I would love to do that. And so anyway, and so she talked to the president of GNSI and was like, hey, we're thinking about maybe doing an article for the journal. And they're like, oh, that'd be very cool. Anyway, it turned into the cover article for the 50th year anniversary edition of the journal.
Wow.
So more internal squealing. And then it was like, well, there's so much, we've done so much here. There's so much that we couldn't fit into this article. There's a lot here. And the president of GNSI was actually the one who was like, well, you guys should do a book. Terrell's done so many awesome books. You guys should team up, do a book. Mike, you've done lots of writing. You should do a book. And we were like, well, okay, great. Yeah, sounds awesome. So she introduced me to the folks at Design Studio Press who have published most of her books and hit it off there well. They thought the concept was great and off to the races. And we've been working ever since. I'll tell you what, if you haven't already, check out the art of Brian Eng.
Oh, I'm very familiar.
You are very familiar. Yeah, it's like, this is what the Mesozoic might really look like. It ain't pretty.
It's weird as fuck.
Yeah, weird as fuck. Brian's a friend of mine. Incidentally, he and I get on very well, and we really feed each other's more like terrifying and R-rated animal reconstruction tendencies. Just he did one of a sauropod stomping on an allosaur, and like the allosaur's abdomen just pops and like all of its viscera just spill out. He's the one, by the way, that actually coined the term giant flying murder heads.
Oh, really? Okay.
For pterosaurs. Yeah, that came as a conversation between the two of us. We sort of coined it together, really, but it's mostly him. We were doing a tour through the pterosaurs traveling exhibit when it came to LA,
which was like a religious experience for me when I saw it at the American Museum of Natural History.
Oh, so you saw it when it launched at the AMNH. Okay, cool. So I guess then, so that I was the lead consultant on that exhibit. Yeah. So I was so the leads on that were the two co-curators, if I could speak, would help. The two co-curators, Alexander Kellner and Mark Norell, and then myself is the plucky sidekick lead consultant. And it's largely focused on flight. And I basically did all the flight stuff, so I'm heavily involved. Very proud of that project.
For sure, you should be. Did you Did you develop that simulator sort of thing?
Essentially, yes. So
I love that so much. That was so rad.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So they purchased a bare bones motion capture flight simulator, and then they had a really amazing animator and games development team there. And I wrote new equations to form the base of that they basically rebuilt it off of the new math. So I basically wrote the new physics. And
that's beautiful.
And then they coded it because I'm not a coder.
Also, is that how you and Seamus Blackley know each other, through like physics engines and stuff like that?
Basically, we initially met because he wanted to get my take on that trailer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's a pterosaur fan.
Yeah.
And it was back when he was pitching the game. We've known each other ever since. But yeah, we've worked together actually on some stuff. We did a TV show together for CBC, which should be coming to the American. I think it's coming to the Smithsonian Channel in the U.S. at some point. Its release date's been delayed because of pandemic-related issues, which many things have, of course. But there is a short clip, essentially trailer of the two of us doing a bite rig test. Big acrocanthosaur biting a Boreapelta armor.
Who biting a nodosaur?
A big acrocanthosaurus.
Oh, okay, cool.
So we built or Seamus's team really built. I helped design a full size acrocanthosaur head, skull basically, with ceramic teeth that mimic actual enamel properties. He's got a great ceramic specialist in his current company, who custom designed enamel property ceramics.
Wow.
And then he's got a polymer expert who did keratin property polymers, and they did a bone property ceramic as well. And so we built a section of Boreapelta with accurate material property armor as best we could do it. And then you've got accurate material property teeth biting it with realistic forces, all at 1-to-1 scale.
Wow.
And we did this for this show. And then, he still has the rig. We're planning to do other fun stuff with it.
That is so rad.
So that's the most extensive project I did with him. That was summer before last.
That's so cool.
So that was fun.
Each episode of Neo Jurassic will include the Jurassic hopes and fantasies of one individual Jurassic fan. Seeing as how we ended our conversation with Dr. Habib wigging out over paleoart icons like Tara Whitlatch and Brian Eng, I figured we might as well feature my friend Cameron. Cam is a truly wonderful paleoartist and animator, and like many of y'all, has a long and loving relationship with the Jurassic franchise. Trigger warning, lol. This conversation got a little saucy over some of the recent creature design elements of the franchise, but please understand, any and all criticism is coming from a place of deep love and reverence for the history of the franchise. For those interested, y'all can follow Cam's work on both Twitter and Instagram at Cam the Cowboy Man. Yeah, in addition to being a dinosaur nut, Cam is also the ultimate creative manifestation of the almighty horse girl archetype. In addition to producing beautiful works of various dinosaurs and ceratopsians, there are a lot of horses and other equine creatures populated throughout his work. It's beautiful stuff. Really lovely. Yeah, his work is truly beautiful, and he's going to have a lot of seriously cool projects coming away in the years to come. Like some very cool projects that y'all are going to be really into when it happens. Anywho, we're going to go ahead and begin our conversation discussing the Jurassic franchise's influence and inspiring Cam to pursue this life of critters, creature design, and animation.
Actually have quite the history with the Jurassic franchise because like when I was like 6 years old, I would like watch it with my nanny and I'd be like scared behind the couch of like the velociraptor in the kitchen scene. And then I would watch like the 2-hour bonus features that's narrated by James Earl Jones on VHS, and like it would talk about the production and making the dinosaurs and the concept design and the animatronics and like the go motion to the full on animation and all of that. And I learned all about animation and creature design and concept art and all that through the original Jurassic Park behind the scenes, like VHS collector's edition, whatever. And so that got me into drawing and sculpting dinosaurs, and that actually kind of jump-started my artistic and creative endeavors in general, was like drawing and sculpting dinosaurs based off of Stan Winston stuff. And so I ended up like getting further into art, went to arts magnet high school in Dallas, and because I grew up in Dallas, and I ended up as a docent at the Perot Museum of Nature and Science in the dinosaur wing, and I got super into paleontology and like paleoart. I'm a huge fan of R.J. Palmer and like that kind of like being in Twitter and being around dinosaurs kind of got me more in the paleoart sphere. And then I ended up going to school for animation. And it just so happened that Jack Horner, as in like that Jack Horner, paleontologist Jack Horner, was a professor at my university. And my senior thesis animation film for my animation school, because I was going to school for animation, was about a little young Deinonychus coming to life. And so he consulted on my project. And so I learned even more about Jurassic Park, and then I went to the 25th anniversary event at Universal and met Jack Horner, and Jack Horner showed my film to Phil Tippett, who was there, and there was this whole thing, and I cried.
Oh my God, I didn't know that. That's so cool.
Yeah, and I got to meet Laura Dern and Jeff Goldblum were there, and that was fun. I got to meet them, and I got to meet the entire Frontier team because Jurassic World Evolution was being showcased there, so I talked to the devs there for a long time, and I got super into game dev. I also ended up working on the Isle, that dinosaur game, for a little bit after that, designing skins for their dinosaurs.
Oh, really?
And yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, sophomore year of college, and this is all it's a little bit out of order, but I have a quite extensive history of dinosaurs. It kind of bloomed during college, and then I actually ended up doing dinosaur concept art for Jack Horner's traveling exhibition that I don't know when that's coming out, thanks COVID, but I did that, and then it all comes back around to I got into a dinosaur documentary series because everyone knew I was so into dinosaurs, and I have all the animation experience and the museum experience, and that's what I'm doing now. So that's Jurassic. The Jurassic franchise is pretty integral to my artistic development, let alone my professional development.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan, and that's why I'm a little bit disappointed with the direction they're going. But hopefully Dominion changes things. But yeah,
did you see Camp Cretaceous?
I loved Camp Cretaceous a lot.
Okay, so there is some of the direction that you
oh
enjoyed.
Yes,
yeah.
But I think primarily the direction that I enjoy with Camp Cretaceous is that it was so true to the Jurassic franchise.
Right.
Because
I think
it was
much more so than the movies.
Exactly.
The new movies.
Exactly. Yeah. And because Camp Cretaceous was made by DreamWorks, and a really good friend of mine that I went to college with was actually a production assistant on Camp Cretaceous at DreamWorks, and so she started telling me about it way back when, and so I got super hyped about it, and she was like, "Oh yeah, we're being super true to the franchise, even a little bit more so than Jurassic World was." I'm like, "Really?" And so it came out, and my boyfriend and I watched it all in one night the day it came out, and we loved it. And he's not even he likes monster movies and sci-fi and horror movies and all that stuff, so he's not a huge Jurassic fan.
Yeah.
And he liked Jurassic World, but Fallen Kingdom even he admitted was it's okay.
Yeah.
But we watched Camp Cretaceous, so holy crap, that was incredible. That
was so great.
It was great. It was so authentic to what we knew about the behind the scenes of that physical park in Jurassic World, let alone the concept art that was contributed to Camp Cretaceous with all the fence designs and the animals that were supposed to be there but weren't in Jurassic World and all that stuff. It was so cool how they incorporated all the fan lore and the DPG stuff into Camp Cretaceous.
So Jurassic is such an influential part of your creative and professional life. What do you think it is that Jurassic accessed in you, in your heart and mind?
Honestly, I think it was the commitment to animal accuracy, not so much paleo accuracy, because obviously they missed the bar on some of those even in the original, but it's more so that at least in the beginning, and at least I would say through the Lost World, they were committed to making the dinosaurs seem like animals, and that was very integral to how I proceeded in my career, because it was all about I have a huge focus on animal animation and making the animals feel like animals and less like monsters, because even on I've worked on some Marvel movies and some other ILM stuff, and all of my focus has been referencing real life analogs. Even when it comes down to documentary series animation, it's all about referencing as much as you can from real animals and making them seem way less like these sci-fi monsters that Jurassic World has kind of turned them into. And that was the main draw for me, I guess, in the first film, because it was what would these animals be if they were alive nowadays? But not so much to the extent that Jaws is what if there's a man-eating shark? It's what if there's a dinosaur but it actually acted like a dinosaur? I don't know. I guess because Jaws made it seem more like a monster than an animal.
Yeah.
And it was the focus on that's also the kind of concept that what makes us love docuseries so much. When you look at Prehistoric Park or Walking with Dinosaurs, the reason why those are so popular is because they portrayed dinosaurs acting like dinosaurs.
Yeah.
and like the original Jurassic did that as well to an extent. So I don't know. I guess that's why
I feel the first two movies kind of adhere to it, and then after that, it's just been mostly out the window, really.
Exactly. And I guess Jurassic World is more the reason why it got me a little bit more interested in the Jurassic franchise is just because it, at least in the beginning, kind of treated a lot of them like real animals.
Yeah.
And then Dominus happened. But like seeing the park running and seeing like a zoological park was really interesting to me just because like I have a background, like I worked at the Dallas Zoo as well and SeaWorld for a little bit. So it was like, how would a park with dinosaurs run in 2015? So
what would you personally like to see in the future of the franchise? And I mean this in the broadest sense.
Well, I mean, the first thing that immediately came to mind is like, I don't know. I do a lot of paleoart in my spare time, and like my main focus is ceratopsians a lot of the time, especially triceratops. And I literally like one of my biggest wishes is just to see a triceratops that doesn't have elephant feet in popular culture, like just once. Like that was like the number one thing that pisses me off with like at least with the original Jurassic Park. Like I don't know, they had like a leeway, but the fact that they even updated the triceratops design to be pretty totally different from the original, and they still didn't update it with that in mind, kind of annoyed the crap out of me. But I don't know. Otherwise, I would like to see like how like Primal is just so unashamed with its gore and violence of like prehistoric animals. Like I don't want to see like to the Primal extent where like the heads are exploding and all that stuff, but like I'd like to see like real authentic creature like horror and gore and like thriller. Like, because right now everything seems so filtered towards kids, and everything has to be marketable towards kids, and the gore and the plot lines and everything has to be marketable towards children, and that's fine because it's dinosaurs, and I guess that comes with the territory. But I would like to see like a Jurassic, like Battle at Big Rock was close, but it was also still a little bit like toddlerified, but like dark and gritty and realistic, and like dinosaurs are allowed to rip into people like in the original book, or like I don't know, like. Even in the original Jurassic Park, like you don't even see Arnold get his arm ripped off. Like just something like seeing something like that, just taking a stance towards one of those more mature dark tones like The Boys, or even like dark comedy or something like that. I don't know. Something a little bit heavier and more adult themed would be, and well, more like written towards like a filmmaking standpoint and less like a theme park ride. I don't know. Something taken more seriously, I guess, is the overall takeaway from what I just said. Just take itself more seriously and less gratuitous and over the top in action blockbuster, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, like, it has become like just like another action movie franchise at this point.
And the original was like much more like thought provoking and like had deeper themes and
maybe.
I take itself more seriously and just commit like slightly more to scientific accuracy. Like if they're gonna bring on a whole new site like paleo consultant and make a big deal out of it, like at least try.
Yeah.
So and not Jurassic Parkify everything. Like even though I know the Allosaurus juvenile design in Falling Kingdom was like decent, and at least it seems like they referenced the skeletal by Hartman or something, but like. I think with Battle of Big Rock, they like kind of ripped that apart because they made it like T-Rex sized and like really robust, and it was what? How does the juvenile turn into that? I have no idea, but
it seems like a completely different species. It seems like a Saurophaganax or something.
Yeah, no, it seemed like a Giganotosaurus or something like huge, and like not at all an Allosaurus. So it was very like, and also Pseudoceratops is like way oversized, like way 3 times oversized,
and also has the elephant feet.
Yeah, and like it even seems like that's the frustrating thing with the Pseudoceratops. Like everything else is great, but if you like its feet, if you just like tried like just defining the anatomy a little bit more in the feet, it would have been perfect.
I wish they would have like made the Carnotaurus horns a little more long and ornate. I mean, with all of the design.
Okay, but you have to admit they literally just directly copied the sideshow Carnotaurus, like directly.
I know. They do that all the time, and it's so upsetting to me. They just copy something.
Like the Allosaurus is just the Allosaurus toy, that like blue and gray one that's like Papa or Shucks.
Papo,
yeah. Like it's literally like you're just copying toys. You're not even trying to take like an artistic license with them like the originals did.
Yeah.
That's what you choose. It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
And it at this point is nitpicking, and it's redundant because we know they're never really going to change. But
yeah. I'm going to try, Cameron. I'm doing a fucking podcast that's trying to bridge the divorced worlds of paleoart and dinosaur enthusiasts and the Jurassic franchise. I'm trying to get them back together again.
I love that, and that's why I'm here for it. But I don't know. Well, I hope something changes, honestly, because it's going to be really depressing that science keeps progressing and like things really, really interesting stuff comes out about dinosaurs that like the mainstream just doesn't even acknowledge or know about because it's not Jurassic Park.
It's not even like the lack of accuracy that's that upsetting to me. It's just the profound like lack of respect and interest and enthusiasm for creating these things. Like
that too.
the design of the
Yeah.
animals in the first two movies, even the third, are
Spinosaurus
iconic,
was really
exquisite.
cool.
Yeah. And now they're just copying like toys. It's like, what? Like, they need to be better. They need to be better. They need to be better.
Oh, my phone just went off, and it's the T-Rex roar. I don't know if you heard that.
I did, yeah. Mine is the raptor call, actually.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I have the T-Rex roar, and then my ringtone is the theme. And I'm wearing a Jurassic Park shirt. Like, I'm a huge fan of this franchise. I want people to understand that.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I'm wearing head-to-toe Jurassic clothing right now, too. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, but...
Exactly. But the people always take it as the second you criticize the franchise, you criticize the dinosaurs, you're not a true fan, or you're not. It's all this stuff, and it's like that's not it. I want it to be good. I want it to be great.
I'm gonna try to ram these two worlds back together and see if we can get something happening here, because it needs to happen at this point. Next question.
Okay.
If you could introduce any extinct species into the Jurassic franchise, what would it be?
I mean, jokingly, okay, well, first off, my biggest one before Fallen Kingdom was Pachyrhinosaurus, and you saw where that went.
Yeah.
And then it turned into Sinoceratops, which isn't even really a Sinoceratops.
Yeah.
Anyways, because Pachyrhinosaurus, besides Triceratops, is like one of my favorite dinosaurs. So that would be it. If I'm trying to think of something else. I mean, did reintroduce to the franchise, or like introduced like in general?
New
Okay.
introduction.
Okay, because I want Spinosaurus to come back really badly. But new. I would like...
Do you want the Spinosaurus to come back in its new form as we know it, or representative of the 2001?
Oh, I want it to be the 2001 one, because that would be, I think, especially with the whole like biosyn genetic engineering takes over the world angle that Dominion is going for. Like, why would they not have a... I know the lore behind the DPGs. It's like some deranged cancerous like monster that has like on a killing spree because it was like Proto-Indominus or something.
Yeah. And
so like that is a cool concept. Like it's like a dinosaur, and like that is a good explanation for why the Spinosaurus is so different from other dinosaurs. So like or what the Spinosaurus we know it as, and like that's a really cool angle to go at it as, and I thought that was really cool, and I like the design of the Spinosaurus a lot, even though it's just baryonyx with the sail. Like it's cool and has a cool color scheme, so I would really love that to come back.
A better baryonyx with the sail than the baryonyx in Fallen Kingdom.
100%. Like the baryonyx mods in like Jurassic Park Operation Genesis are better baryonyx than the baryonyx in Fallen Kingdom.
Yeah, but that is the worst thing to come out of Fallen Kingdom for me, was the baryonyx. That broke my heart.
It's just Gatorsaurus or whatever.
It's the Saurgator.
Yeah. Like just thin its head out. Like Fred the Dinosaur Man, he did like an edit of it and actually made it.
I saw that, and it's beautiful. I love it. And why wouldn't they do that? It's such a alien, unique, iconic look, and yet they just go for a souped up crocodile on two legs.
And like give it all the scoots and the crocodile tail.
I know.
Who knows?
It makes me so sad.
Dinosaur that I want. Okay. I would really like to see. Well, see, I'm a big Ceratopsian fan, and the Pseudoceratops, Pachyrhinosaurus, Triceratops. I already have all those.
Do you typically prefer Centrosaurines or Chasmosaurines?
See, I love Chasmosaurus just because I watched Prehysteria as a kid, that like stop motion movie with the dinosaur puppets, and it was the Chasmosaurus. I loved them. But I don't know. I do also love Triceratops a lot, and I think I prefer Chasmosaurids just for drawing because they have all like the high angular stuff.
And they're so elegant.
Exactly. And Centrosaurians are more like buffalo, bulky, like naughty, like I don't know. So it's like that different. But drawing and animation wise, I love Chasmosaurids more.
Oh, I love them so much.
I would love to see, honestly, like maybe like an ichthyosaur would be cool, or even like going into Cenozoic, like a mammoth Jurassic Parkified. Like it would just be like a brown mammoth, white, like Ice Age mammoth probably. But like I'd like to see how they took it. I don't know if they ever took some, because I'm a big like I love elephants and mammoths and stuff, so that would be cool. And since they have a Lystrosaurus, like a Diacodon. Oh no, A Gorgonops. A Gorgonops would be awesome in the Jurassic franchise.
Yeah.
Or I know Stransevia or something. That would be really cool because they already are going Permian, so why not go with that? It's literally like dinosaur version of the saber-toothed cat.
Yeah, they're cool.
So that would be actually, I think that's going to be my final answer. I know Stransevia would be pretty awesome because Primeval kind of clued me onto them, and so I got obsessed with them through that.
Well, it's been a long time coming, but there it is, and there it goes. Episode 1 of the Neo Jurassic podcast has concluded. If you've made it this far, oh my god, thank you. I sincerely hope y'all have enjoyed the ride, and very much hope that you'll join me for future episodes as well. Next week, for instance, is what I'm particularly excited about. We'll be taking a look at the wild possibilities of a herd of Dinochirus escaping the private zoo of a Floridian drug lord and flourishing in the Florida Everglades. Sure sounds problematic, and I can't wait! Be sure to like, subscribe, tell your friends, and tune in. Until then, bye.